Hello guys, and welcome to another video tutorial that I've decided to do as well. So just letting you know guys, in the future I'll be doing video tutorials that focus on IGCSE past paper 2 scenarios that you guys already are aware of that you normally receive as a pre-release material before the exam. I'll be talking and guiding you guys on what kind of strategies you could use to be able to solve almost every single scenario that you are given, because the scenarios change year by year before your exams, and I'll be showing you some of the tactics that you can use, and of course we will also be doing the programming in Python as well. So let's get started. I have chosen one past paper for today's video tutorial, and I think this is a 2017 past paper 2-question scenario, and I just chose it so that hopefully it can be within the time frame of the video tutorial. So let's get started guys. So first of all, you're normally giving a pre-release material before the exam. Your teacher would normally give you this pre-release. That's what I normally do with my students. And so you need to look over the scenario that you're given, and you need to create a program that is based on the scenario, which you're going to be using. The program you create, you're going to use to answer the questions in the exam. So let's look at the scenario. So the scenario, the first thing you need to do is to read and understand the scenario. Then the next thing you're going to do, guys, is to always create a breakdown of the scenario. So you're going to break it down into very sub-problems, like what you might have heard from your teacher's decomposition. You break down this whole scenario, which is sort of like a problem, into sub-problems so that you can solve it. And you already know that every single scenario in the past paper 2 is always made up of task 1, 2, and 3. So let's begin, and then we'll work through the strategies together. So here it says an experiment has taken place which measures the reaction speeds of students. Each student is aged from 12 to 16. So always take note of those key points, guys. 12 to 16 is the key point here. So you know that the age range of the students has to be from 12 to 16. And they need to belong to a house which is either Saturn or Mars. You also know that there's a restriction. So this is where you think about the data validation methods that you're going to apply. The data validation methods would be something that you would apply when you're programming to make sure, first of all, that the ages the students enter is between 12 to 16, but also to make sure that the house the students enter is, between Saturn or Mars. Now, a program is required to store the age, the house, the schoolhouse, the reaction time of each student in the school. There are 650 students in the school. So what we can tell from this part of the scenario is that what you need to require from the user is basically your program needs to require the age, which must be between 12 to 16, but also the schoolhouse, which must fall under Saturn or Mars, but also reaction time. So that already tells you that there's been some example, like what they said, there's been an experiment that has gone on, and there is a certain reaction time each student has taken for that experiment. It also says that there are 650 students in the school, so this gives you an idea of what you're going to be using again, which is, again, you're going to apply a loop structure, a for loop. If you guys already know what that is, we're going to see what it is once we start the program. A for loop, because you need to loop over 650 students. So your program needs to go for 650 students. You can also use a while loop, but it will be a different way of how you can, apply this particular part of the program. So a for loop is more, I would say, I would recommend it to you using that to be able to loop over the number of students so that you can, apply the scenario too. So the program should be able to output the reaction times of the different student groups. Now it says, write and test the program for the school. And they always give you these 3 points for the IGCSE. They always tell you what are the 3 main points you should be focusing on when you're creating your program. And the first one says that your program must include appropriate prompts for the entry of data. You should also include some error messages, which is where you have to validate the data, making sure, for example, the age is from 12 to 16, making sure that the schoolhouses are Saturn or Mars. And of course, that's pretty much it. And making sure that the number of students is 650, of course. So the error message would go more to, like, if, for example, a student enters an age that is like 18, that doesn't match then you should have an error message that will display. Or if they enter another sort of house, schoolhouse, that doesn't match what you have, then an error message should display. So this is why they tell you that you need to have some sort of error message that would be displayed or set out clearly. All variables and constants and other identifiers must have meaningful names. So you will need to complete these 3 tasks. Each task must be fully tested. So task 1, it always is broken down, guys, into 3 tasks. So whenever you see these scenarios, they're broken down into 3 tasks. And believe me, guys, if you're going to take computer science for IB, it is very essential that you really know, if you understand how to break these scenarios into solvable solutions, then you're going to find the IB curriculum for computer science really easy, and also programming, because you're developing your problem solving skills and your computational skills. So the first task says that you need to set up arrays. So that means you're going to set up a place for where you can store the student ages, where you're going to store the schoolhouses that are being entered, and where you're also going to be storing the reaction times. So it says, set up one-dimensional arrays for the whole school to store. So the arrays that you're going to create, that already tells you one-dimensional arrays basically refers to lists in Python. Since for the IGCSE, most of the time you're using Python. And then, of course, as you go to the IB, use Java. So for Python, one-dimensional arrays are referring to lists. So you're going to have to set up a list to store the age of the students, the schoolhouse of the students, and the reaction time. It also says you need to input and store the records for an appropriate sample of students, and then your inputs must be validated on entry. Invalid inputs would be rejected. So that's task 1. So task 1 tells you guys that it's all about creating lists, which are one-dimensional arrays, where you're going to be storing the age, the schoolhouse, and the reaction time for each student. And also, you're going to also have the part where you're going to ask the students or the users to enter their age, their schoolhouse, and reaction time, because it says you need to validate their entry. So that means that you're going to check and make sure on task 1 of your program that the age the students are entering must be between 12 to 16, as you're given here, and the house must fall under Saturn and Mars. So that's pretty much what the validation is going to be for this task 1. For task 2, it says you're going to output schoolhouse-based statistics. So this is what the task is. And so that means you're going to be using your sample, which contains 650 students, to calculate and output the average reaction times for the students in the Saturn and in Saturn and students in the Mars houses. So what they're asking you to do is to find the reaction times for students in the separate house in both the Saturn and the Mars houses. So obviously that means you're going to first have to find the total reaction time, and you're going to divide that by the length of the number of reaction times that you have for students in Saturn and Mars. You notice that they don't ask you to find the average separately. Since they say find the average reaction times for students in Saturn and Mars, that means you can just have one list, one-dimensional array that's going to store the reaction times for students that are in Saturn and Mars, and then you total that up and you divide it by the length of the number of reaction times you have inside of that one-dimensional array or list for reaction times. For task 3, so usually for this IGCSE scenarios, guys, pre-release, if you guys have come across several of them, you notice that task 3 usually is the one that is a bit more twisty and allows you to think more logically. And so this is why they said extend your program to prompt the users to input a specific age and schoolhouse. Using only records that match the criteria, the program should identify, calculate, and output the average reaction time and the slowest reaction time. So what they're trying to tell you here is that for task 3, you're going to be asking, a part of your program should ask the user to enter a specific age. That, of course, means the age has to fall between 12 to 16. And it should also ask the user to enter a specific house, which then has to fall between Saturn or Mars. And based on these inputs that the user are going to enter, you're going to have to check with your list, like with your schoolhouse list and your age list, and see if there's a match. If there's a match, then you're going to have to find out which corresponding reaction time matches both the age and the schoolhouse that the users enter. So for example, I'm going to show you what I mean. Let's say the user enters an age of 13, and then the user enters a schoolhouse of Mars. So you're going to check and see where there's a match because you already have created a one-dimensional array, or you could say a list before that stores the ages and the house. So you're going to check the age list or one-dimensional array and see if there's a match with the age 13 for what the user has entered. And then if there's a match, you're going to check the same index position that was found on the age list that you created and see if there's the same match on that same index position in the schoolhouse that the student has entered. So let's say the student entered Mars. So you're going to check and see if there's a match, because then if the student entered an age of 13, and let's say the first age in your age array or list is 13, you're going to check and see in that first position, that is 0 position, because the index starts from 0 on the list. In that 0 index position of schoolhouse, does it also match the schoolhouse that the user has entered? So let's say the user enters Mars, and if you check your own schoolhouse array or list, you'll find out that the first one is Mars, let's say. So there is a match. So based on that index position, you're going to use it to get the reaction time in the reaction times list that correspond to both the age and the schoolhouse. So let's say the reaction time for age 13 and schoolhouse Mars in the reaction time list is 13 seconds, for example. And so you're going to get that and you're going to store that in another separate list that you need to create. This is one way you could do it, so that at the end of the day, you can find the average reaction times for that specific match of age and schoolhouse that the user has entered, and find the slowest reaction time. If a situation where the student enters an age which is like 13, and in your age list or array, it does match, and maybe that's like the first position, index position, because maybe 0 is the first, and then 1 is the second. Let's say it's the second index position. So there is an age 13. But then when you look at that same index position number 2 in the age array, and you look at it in the schoolhouse array, it doesn't match because maybe the user entered Mars, and the index position 2 on the schoolhouse array is not Mars, but it's Saturn. So there is no match. There's no corresponding match. So the program, this task wants you to allow the users to input specific age in schoolhouse, and then using that input, you're going to find the matching criteria input so that you can find the average reaction time and the slowest reaction time. So based on what the user would enter for age and what would enter for house, it should be corresponding, so you can find and match the right reaction times for that particular age and house. I hope you guys understood. So anyways, let's move on. So the last part says the output should include a suitable message for each of the reaction times identified. So that means anytime the reaction time is identified, there should be a suitable message saying, oh, your reaction time has been found, that kind of thing. And if it's not identified, then there should be another message saying, sorry, your match did not, was not found. And maybe there should be some part that would say, would you like to continue or exit? And if they press the, for example, 1 to continue, then they continue on the search. If they press any other thing, then they exit. So we're going to look at that. So guys, the strategy is always first things first. You need to read the scenario first and understand the scenario, and then you need to break it down. And I would suggest that you open some sort of like Google Docs file or anything on a notebook and break down the scenario from these tasks to know what you're supposed to do for task 1, what you're going to do task 2, what you're going to do task 3. And then based on that, it's going to be easier for you to now create a program. I would suggest that you do this in pseudocode first. If you guys know what it is, pseudocode is like an algorithm design. You first plan your program in a pseudocode English-like statements form, and then you program it in normal programming with Python. But then if you're finding pseudocode hard, I will just say that you should just write them as normal English statements, but you should break down exactly what you need in your program so you don't miss any part of the scenario. So we're going to do that first, and then probably in my next video tutorials, we will be looking at how to be able to answer these remaining questions. So we're going to do that in our next video tutorials because I don't think I would like to extend this video tutorial too long. So we'll be looking at how to answer the remaining questions for the past paper 2. So that's what I hope to do for, video tutorials I will be recording for the IGCSE paper 2 series. Okay, so this is what I already have done to save the time. So based on the scenario that we've read here for paper 2, you first have to write out the main points. So the scenario main points is basically age range has to be between 12 to 16. That's the first thing you should write down. The reaction times, of course, should be, you specify what it's going to be. So you're writing down what you know the age should be, the reaction time should be in seconds. You're also writing down main points from the scenario of what schoolhouses is required. So this is what you have to do for every single scenario that you're given anytime. You have to have a part where you write down the main points that you've observed when you read the scenario, and you just basically list them out. So we also know that 650 students is required in the school, and we know that the variables that are needed is the age, the reaction time, and the schoolhouse. And we also know that according to the scenario, if you guys go back, it says that error messages have to be displayed. So that's something also to note, saying that there should be an error message that is needed for the age and the schoolhouse variable to validate. Then you should create a part that says task 1, because each of the time the scenario is given, you are giving task 1 to 3. So task 1 is about setting up arrays and storing information or records. So that means you're going to set up an array for all of those variables that you need, which is age, reaction time, and schoolhouse. So set up age array, set up reaction time array, set up schoolhouse array, and of course you're going to be validating entry, because you're going to make sure that the user enters age between 12 to 16 and schoolhouse of how, Saturn or Mars. For task 2, you also have to list out what you want, exactly what is required from you in task 2, and it's required that you calculate the average reaction times for students both in Saturn and Mars, so it's pretty straightforward. So you're just going to write calculating the average reaction time. And now task 3 is where I said, like before, usually for all these past papers, task 3 is where you have to kind of think logically, more into the task of what you need to do. So for this task, you need to be able to ask students to enter specific age in schoolhouse like we've seen, and of course you need to validate the data entry, and then you need to find specific age index position in the age array. So index position means that if the student enters an age, any age from 12 to 16, you have to go back to your age array or your age list and find out if there's a match there. So you have to search through all of the ages inside of that list or array so you can get a match. So that's why you need the index positions. And I hope you guys have covered index positions and lists. If you haven't, I will go over it very briefly. Then you have to find the corresponding schoolhouse that matches that particular index position of the age in the schoolhouse array. And if there's a match, that means if there's a complete match where the student entered an age that matches the age array and enters using the same index position, it checks for the schoolhouse that the student enters in the schoolhouse array, and there's a match, then it's successfully going to find the matching reaction time in the reaction times array. So using that matching index position from the age and schoolhouse arrays. And finally, it's going to display a suitable message to show the average reaction time and the slowest reaction time. So I gave an example here. This is what I normally use with my students to explain this as well. And I said, let's say that you have an age array, okay, an age one-dimensional array. And inside of this age array, this is the records that have been recorded from the students. Just as an example, the age 13, 15, 12, 16, 14, and 13. So let's say this is what the students have entered so far. And then you have your schoolhouse array, and in your schoolhouse array, you have all of these options that were entered: Saturn, Mars, Saturn, Mars, Saturn, Mars. And then the reaction times, these were the reaction times that were entered from the students as well. So let's say for task 3, the student has entered a specific age and a specific house. So let's say the student enters the age 13. So this is the specific age that the student enters to do task 3, which is to find their corresponding reaction time. And let's say they enter the house Saturn. So what's going to happen is your program is supposed to go back to the age array and search for the specific age. So let's say it searches it and it finds it at the 0 index position. Because of course, in a list, it always starts from 0. It goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let's say it finds it at the 0 index position. Now it's going to use that same index position to check for the house in schoolhouse array and see if it matches what the user has entered. And so the user entered Saturn, and it finds that there is a very good corresponding match. And so that means already that these two have checked out both the age and the schoolhouse. And so your program is going to use that same index position to check for the corresponding reaction time in the reaction times array. And so it gets that and it stores it into a new array or list called times in this case, and it stores that 34. So it does that for all of the records, guys. It keeps doing that for all of the records. And you notice here I put It does that for record 5, that is at the index position of 5 on the age array. It still matches the 13 that the user has entered as age. However, using that same index position for schoolhouse array, we find that they don't actually match because the user entered a specific schoolhouse as Saturn, but this is Mars. So it doesn't match, so it does not get this reaction time to save inside of this array. And so guys, this is exactly what your program is going to do. Keep checking all of the records to find the corresponding matches and store them in a specific array. At the end of the day, it's going to add up everything, find the average, and find the slowest reaction time. So that's what task 3 is. And this is what you should always do, guys, is always make sure you write out the points, your main points of your scenario, the task 1, what it's requiring you to do, task 2, you break it down, what it also requires you to do, and task 3. And then based on this, you can easily create your program. Now, without further ado, I would like to show you a very nice website that I normally use with my students to create programs. It's called Riffleate.com, and if you go to Riffleate.com, it's a very useful platform. I don't know if you guys already know about it, but you can create any program using any programming language of your choice. Even websites can be designed here. So I normally use this online web-based platform with some of my students because some of them don't have Python installed, and I just felt I should share it with you. So in case if you don't have Python software installed on your computer, you can also use this to program. So what you have to do is click on sign up if you're a first-time user, and you can sign up with your Google account or a Facebook account. I'm not really sure what this one is, but if you have this account, you can also sign up with it. So I'm just going to sign up, for example, just to show you with my Google account. I'm already signed up here, so I'm just doing this to show you how to do it. So once you click on your Google account, it automatically just signs you up. It asks you for the emails that you would like to use, and this is my email. So if I click on that, it basically just signs me up and I'm logged in. So I have already been signed up, guys. I just showed you the procedure in case if you want to sign up. And once you're signed up and you're logged in, you should be able to see your name at the top left. And to be able to create a program here, you would have to click New REPL. Another thing you should be aware of is if you scroll down, I'm just going to close that. If you look at once you're on the home, you're going to look at, there's actually a place where you can create a REPL. If you don't want to click this option where you see create, and you click on the plus sign, and you can see all of the languages, programming languages you can also create. REPL is just like you're creating a program file, a new program file. And then recent, it shows you all of your recent programs that you created, which is basically your REPLs. So there are many fun things here to do, and I think this platform does accommodate a lot of people. And the good thing is that you can work with groups, like if you have group projects with your classmates or friends in programming, you can all work here together and communicate and chat and work all in one program file. So that's where you go to Teams. Okay, so let's get started. Let's say we want to create a program for this one, so I'll get you started on this one. You basically have to click on New REPL, and it's going to ask you to choose the language. Obviously, we need to use Python, so we select Python, and then, of course, the title of your program. So you could call this IGCSE Paper 2, and then we click Create REPL, and then it's just going to create for your file, which is your program file, your Python program file. On the side in the middle here is where you write your program, and, of course, on the console area is where you run your program. So the first thing you're going to do as a very good programmer, if you're starting up programming, is always try, once you have your plan out scenario, and then you know what you're supposed to do, then always try to include commenting. So if you don't already know, whenever you want to include comments in Python, you have to use some sort of hashtag. If it's a single line comment, just like that, like what I wrote here, or you can use single quotes, okay, if it's basically a multi-line comment. So hashtag, we're going to use hashtag, and we're going to write down our program, which is basically, we'll just call it a name and say IGCSE Paper 2. So we'll write the title. Normally, what you're supposed to do, you're supposed to have like a program header. And so what that would mean, guys, is basically a program header would mean that you need to have some sort of thing where you put like your name. It's basically going to be something like author, and then you put your name there, and it's going to be like your program file and program file name as well, and then it's going to be like the date you created the program, date created program, and so on. So this is what it's going to be. This should actually be a single speech quote, so I'm just letting you know. And then you're going to write stuff like, I think you could also write like your date that you edited program, date edited program, and well, just giving you an example. So this is what we kind of call program headers. Normally it's going to be like a single speech quotes. Normally you could use single speech quotes here, but I think double is also fine. So you just have to fill this in with the missing pieces. For now, I'm just going to remove this header, but that's the appropriate thing to do as a programmer, or a programmer that is on the way to be professional. So the thing is, we'll write the first title, which is the IGCSE paper 2, and then we'll start off with our hashtag again, and this will be our task 1. So it's always good to be organized. And so this task 1 is focusing on the part of, if you go back here, it says setting up the arrays and storing records. So you can write it as that, setting up arrays and storing records. Okay. So once you've done that, the next thing you're gonna be doing obviously is come down to a new line. Okay. I'm just trying to zoom this in so you guys can see. And then you come down and start to do your program. So what is task 1 asking us for? Go back here again to your breakdown, scenario breakdown, and see that it's asking you to set up each of these arrays. So you're gonna have to set up the age, one-dimensional array, the reaction time, and schoolhouse. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna set up age is equal to, of course you know how to create one-dimensional arrays, I assume. So it's obviously the empty square brackets. Remember, one-dimensional arrays in Python is basically creating a list. So, and then that's what you're going to do. It's going to be empty because it does not contain anything until students start to enter their age, or the users start to use the program. Then you're going to create your schoolhouse. So you could do it with an underscore if you'd prefer, or you could just do it without spacing. Remember, variables do not require you to make spacing. And then you're going to come down and create the next one, which is going to be your reaction times. You notice that we are creating the 3 arrays based on what the scenario is asking us to do. Sorry about that. Based on what the scenario is asking us to do. So these 3 are now created. We also have to validate entry. So that means we have to ask users to enter their ages, the reaction times in schoolhouses. We have to ask the students, and we have to make sure that they're entered according to the range of age and, of course, according to the type of schoolhouses. So let's go down and let's do that. So first we're going to create a variable so students can enter their age. We can call this variable student age. Make sure that the variable name you create is actually making sense. And then we say, of course, this is an integer type, and we say input. And then we basically say enter your age. Oops, I don't know what that is. Okay, and then you give a space. I always like to give a space so that the user has like a space to enter the age. It's not too close to the age. So now we have to validate, and we have to make sure that the age is actually falling between the range we are given. So we're going to say if student age, make sure you write the variable name correctly. If student age is greater than or equal to, I'm going to have to find it, guys. Sometimes with my keyboard, I really can't find stuff. So I'm going to find greater than or equal symbol. Yeah, I got it here. So I'll just use that one. So it's greater than or equal to 12, and so remember the range, student age also has to be greater than or equal to 16. No, that not greater than, should be less than, because they say from 12 to 16. So we'll use the less than symbol. So that should be less than or equal to 16. So as long as it falls in between this range, please make sure with if conditional statements, I forgot to remove that, guys, from here. Please be careful. Now, what I wanted to say is with if conditional statements, please be very careful, because whenever you write if conditional statements, don't think you can just say if student age is greater than or equal to 12 and you basically say greater than or less than or equal to 16. You have to put this, again, this variable name student age after the logical operator, and then you have to, of course, specify which is less than or equal to 16. Okay, it's very, very important. So now you have specified the condition. You've said that the student age the user should enter should be between 12 and 16, which is exactly what we have here in the scenario, that it says it's from 12 to 16, 16 inclusive. Now come down to a new line. Now the new line is, if it is falling in this range, you can definitely print a message and say age has been accepted, something like this. Or you could also do the method where you ask the person to enter their schoolhouse. Okay, so that would be, for example, you would create a variable and you will say schoolhouse. Okay, so you could do it this way. And you say is equal to, of course, this is going to be a string type because you're giving them the option of Saturn or Mars. And you're going to say enter your schoolhouse. Okay, and then you can specify to them what the schoolhouse should, how they should enter the schoolhouse, because some people might enter Saturn with a capital S or a small s, so you need to be always specific. So you could say Saturn or, Mars. So you specify how you want them to enter it. And then so that's it. So here is this, what does this mean? It means only if the student age has been accepted and validated, then the student can be asked to enter their schoolhouse. If not, of course, we're going to have an else statement if you guys already know conditionals, and that's going to say, well, else, if this condition hasn't been met in the first place, then of course it's not going to be allowing you to enter any schoolhouse or anything else. So if this condition is met, so now we have to make sure that the condition is met, that they've entered a schoolhouse that actually is correct. So we can do another statement saying if schoolhouse, okay, don't forget that I'm putting all of these underscores just to avoid spacing in variable names. So you say if schoolhouse in, you could do it this way. This is another method where you can specify, saying that the schoolhouse they enter should be in this list of options. So this is another way you can validate instead of writing it if schoolhouse is equal to Mars or schoolhouse is equal to Saturn. You could do it this way. You could say schoolhouse is in Saturn. And this one would work if you want to write like all sorts of options or ways that they could write schoolhouse, like they could write Saturn, for example. You could say, oh, or if this way, because this is pretty much what they could do. Or you say, oh, or they wrote it this way, then you're accepting all if they have written everything of this sort. And then so you don't need to specify how they should write it if you're going to use this method of validation, where you have to write the list of options that you accept, because you're saying as long as the schoolhouse they enter is inside these list of options, then you basically accept it. So Saturn would be the first one, Saturn again, and then of course you're going to say Saturn, and then you do the same thing for Mars. You could say Mars with a capital S, and then you could say Mars like this is also accepted, or you could say Mars with all lowercase, that is also accepted. So you're saying if schoolhouse is in any of these options, then it's accepted. You come down and you basically say print again, and you could print a message saying schoolhouse is accepted. And then you basically, oops, sorry about that. And then you basically close your speech quotes, and then you come down here and you ask them for the next thing, because now the age has been accepted, the schoolhouse has been accepted. And then of course you're going to be asking them for the reaction times. And I have to come back again. Remember that we created empty arrays for the age, schoolhouse, and reaction times. We still have to add the age that the user is entering successfully, if remember, into the age array, because if that is successfully validated, it needs to be added to the age array. That's something we forgot. Well, I forgot to include. I'll do that now. And we have to do the same for schoolhouse. So we will do that. Let's just finish this block first. So print schoolhouse is accepted, and then now you ask them for the reaction times, and you basically tell them, so reaction times is going to be an integer value, obviously, since it is in times and seconds. So you're going to tell them enter the reaction times, okay? The reaction time of the experiment. You could write that whole sentence. It's always good to be clear about what you need from the user. And this one does not require any sort of validation, because according to the scenario, we are not really given any validation for reaction time, so it doesn't really matter what the reaction time is going to be. I also forgot to mention, there's something I forgot to mention as well, which is this the number of students, because if you guys remember, it says that there should be 650 students in the school. So I didn't include that here, which I forgot to do. We're supposed to have the for loop. So you're saying for student, for example, number, okay? Because you're going to have to specify how many times you want this program to run for. So you're going to say for student number in range, okay? This is the for loop structure, from 0 to 650, which means it's going to go all the way from 0 to 649, basically, because it doesn't count the last value. So the for loop has to be specified, guys. Sorry I didn't mention that, because this whole block has to be repeated, depending on the number of students, which is 650 times, so that 650 students can enter the records based on the experiment. So that now we've included the for loop, we need to take this back, okay? So take it, it's just the problem of indentation. This is why we have the red line, because it says expected indented block. There should be right spacing, so take this back to the previous line, just press enter, tells you where the right spacing should be, as you guys can see, the indentation. And also take this one back, and then press enter, it tells you where this should be, and pretty much just adjust this since we didn't include it from the beginning. And so this one also has to be in here, so tab it in as well. Tab this one in as well, so that means you use your tab key, and then take this one all the way back. I think I closed something. Okay, let me try to make this wider so you guys can see. There, and now press enter, so that's where it's tabbed. Just make sure that it is on the right section, because sometimes it doesn't exactly come on the right section. Okay, I think it is now. All right, so this is tabbed, and now this one, reaction times, obviously has to be tabbed in as well. So I think everything is now tabbed and spaced correctly. So it's important you maintain those indentation spaces with the for loop since we've added it now. So remember, the for loop is to allow this block of codes that you're going to be writing to repeat the certain amount of times that you have. Okay, so the school student's age is equal to input, enter your age, then enter student age. So this is the validation part. And then of course, this is the part where age is accepted, and then enter schoolhouse, and then schoolhouse is checked in the list of options based on what the user would enter. In this case, you wouldn't necessarily need to have this. You just tell them to enter schoolhouse, since you have a method of checking the different ways they could enter the Saturn or Mars. And then this prints out saying schoolhouse is accepted. And then the reaction times is also asked. So now the last thing we're going to do here is for task 1, what we forgot to do, since we've already validated the entries as they've asked us to do. So task 1, we've set up the arrays, we've validated the entries. We need to store it as well, because it says that we're supposed to set up in task 1 here, guys, it says set up and store records. So we're going to have to store this information. So when we come to the student age and student age is accepted, it's only then that we can store the age successfully. So we're going to write the name of the array that we created, the keyword called append, which goes with list in Python. The keyword append is used to add something to a list, or in this case to an array. List array is the same in terms of one-dimensional. So we append successfully the student age based on what the student has entered, because it has been validated and checked to be within range. So we now append it to the age array that we created. And we do the same thing with the schoolhouse as well. So we come down and we also write the name of the array that we created for schoolhouse, and then we also append it. So we also say .append, we use the keyword, and we append and we put the variable name that we use to store the schoolhouse that the user has entered, which has been successfully validated. We put it inside here, so we write schoolhouse, and that's basically it. So we've successfully appended that. Now the last part for task 1 is we also can come here and say print. We don't need to print anything since we don't have to validate, but we need to append the reaction time that the user enters into, the student enters into the reaction time arrays. So we basically write the name of the array, which is reaction times, and we say .append, and then we just basically in the brackets or parentheses write the variable that we created. And I would suggest that you try to change the name of the variable that you have here and the name of the variable you've used for the array, so that they don't have there's no confusion with the compiler. Maybe call this just reaction time instead of reaction times. And then here you put the underscore, make sure you write it exactly, and then this will basically be added to the reaction times array. And so this is the end of task 1, guys, for what exactly you're asked to do in task 1. I'm going to be creating second part of this video tutorial that just shows you what task 2 you're asked to do in task 2. I'll just show you the overall of the program, how it's going to look like and how you're going to run it, of course. And then that's going to give you an idea of how you need to create the scenario. But this is how you get started. Basically, if you run the scenario so far, let me just rerun it again. So this is how you run it here, guys. You press the run, it asks you to enter your age. So let's say let's enter the correct ones for now. 13, it says age is accepted, enter your schoolhouse. So let's say I enter it with lowercase, which is Saturn, and it says schoolhouse is accepted. So we have a sort of like we have an error here, which is append for schoolhouse. So we have to check why we have this error. So let's look. So it says schoolhouse has no attribute, which is, I'm gonna have to check that. Schoolhouse has no attribute. According to the error, it's always good to see what the error is. It says it has no attribute append. So let's see, we must have spelled it maybe incorrectly. So we wrote schoolhouse and we said dot append. Perhaps we should change, let's try to change the name. Let's try to change it to schoolhouses, okay? And so we write schoolhouses here. So schoolhouses here, so we put schoolhouses that append schoolhouse. Okay, we successfully did that. Now let's try and see if, because I think that might be what it is. So I'll check. So here we enter the schoolhouse and we say Saturn. Oh, there it is. So I told you guys, sometimes the problem is because there's a similar, I'm glad that actually happened because it shows you what I just did with the reaction times. There's a similarity with the names, and so there's a mismatch with the compiler. When it does run, it gets confused as what exactly is the difference between the schoolhouse of the array and this one that is here for append. So here the last part is enter the reaction time. So this, I'm going to run it again so you can see properly because I had to squeeze in the console. So here again is Saturn. And then here it says enter the reaction time, so let's say 35, and then it pretty much says, again, it repeats all the way all over again. You guys probably know why, because I'm entering this all over for 650 times, remember, for the for loop that we have here. So don't forget, that's why it's happening all over again. So I'm entering my age, and then it says enter your house. So let's say I entered Saturn with capital, it still accepts it. Enter your reaction time, I enter 36. And again, let's say we enter something wrong. For example, we enter 25-year-old. It still tells me enter your age. You notice it still keeps going. It doesn't accept it. It doesn't accept it. Now, if I try to enter something like 15, it does accept it. And then it asks me for the house. And then I enter it again. And then it moves on and it keeps doing this. So I'm going to show you in my second video tutorial how exactly you're going to continue. I'm going to stop this for now. So this is how you run your program. I'm going to show you how you're going to continue this for task 2 so you can be able to do it successfully. I'm just going to show you task 2 and 3 and explain it to you. I hope this video tutorial was useful. It was quite long, and I'll see you guys in the next one.